Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogans. A few months ago, Ray Yang was named as the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Special Initiatives at NAEA. And I'm very excited to have them on the podcast today. Now, I was lucky enough to work with Ray when they were with AOEU for a little bit. And Ray has been an art teacher, a dean, an administrator, a museum educator, done PD, done outreach, and I'll let them talk about their career a little bit more in just a second. But before I bring them on, I want to tell a quick story that can hopefully inform the conversation just a little bit today. Now, in 2018, NAEA had their national convention in Seattle. I was there with AOEU. Ray was there because Ray is from Seattle. And we just ran into each other by chance, and we were sitting together during one of those large general sessions. And up on stage, the reps from NAEA were talking about the new Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force that was going to be starting soon. Ray just got this look in their eye and said, I really want to be a part of that. And lo and behold, they became a part of it. And the work from that task force has translated into Ray being named to this new position. And I think there are a lot of really good things that are going to be coming down the pipeline with, both NAEA's focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also having Ray in that position. I think they're going to do great. But I am very excited for the opportunity to talk to Ray about all of that. So let me bring them on now. Ray Yang is joining me now. Ray, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Tim. How are you?
I am doing well. We have a lot of big things, a lot of important things to talk about today. But to start with, I would love you to just introduce yourself. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself, what you've done as an art educator, anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Ray Yang. I use they, them pronouns, I'll mention, and my current role is as the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Special Initiatives for the National Art Education Association, so NAEA. I live in Seattle, Washington, so I actually work remotely. NAEA's headquarters is in Alexandria, Virginia. Mm-hmm. And I've been an art educator for it's wild to think about it, for about 20 plus years.
Wow.
I've been doing this work. And so ever since grad school, I grew up on the East Coast, but I did my graduate work at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. And I've had a career which has really spanned just about, I think, every single kind of arena that arts education includes. So worked in museums, worked as a teaching artist, done community arts education work, teacher professional development training, artist professional development work, worked as an administrator in public schools, in Chicago public schools. I've taught in graduate school, taught graduate courses. I've been a classroom teacher, so at an in-pen school, taught middle and high school students. Worked at more recently worked at the Seattle Art Museum doing some teaching artist work. So a little bit of everything. And throughout all of that too, also always been thinking about issues of equity and diversity within my arts education teaching work. So a little bit of everything, I think, kind of throughout my time.
Yeah, for sure. It's been an impressive career. We'll say that. Now, you and I worked together a while back when you spent some time working at Art of Education. So,
yeah.
So I got to know you there, and now when I saw that you were named as the director of equity, diversity, and inclusion, I don't remember the full super long
No
title at
worries. No.
NAEA. I just thought to myself, this is a perfect fit for you. So can you talk a little bit, I guess, about how the position came about and why you thought it was a good fit for you, why this job is, aligns with your passions and what you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So the equity, diversity, and inclusion work has been happening for a while at NAEA, and there have been some really awesome people who've been shepherding this work throughout the
Mm-hmm.
years. But I'd say it really started picking up steam maybe like 4 or 5 years ago now. So a couple of folks who were instrumental in this work were Wanda Knight, who is actually she's the president elect of
Mm-hmm.
NAEA, as well as James Rawling, who is the current president
Right.
of NAEA. And so they were both involved with the initial ED&I task force, which was created several years ago. And I kind of think of that as like one of the initial sort of major initiatives that NAEA was doing to really look at where the organization stood around these kinds of issues. And so they gathered a group of, I think it was about 20 people from around the country. I was actually part of that initial task force. And
Mm-hmm.
so there were several meetings where we were looking at NAEA, kind of taking a hard look and a really critical look at the organization. And from that work was created a set of recommendations, about 16 recommendations for the organization. And those are still kind of giving them as the guiding star for this work within the organization. The first recommendation was actually creating a standing commission for ED&I work, which was done very quickly. So there's actually a group of the ED&I Commission is a group that is selected, and there are, I believe, is it 8 commissioners? I should know this number off the top of my head, but who they represent all the different divisions, and then there are also a couple of at large who help to guide the equity, diversity, inclusion work. And then the last recommendation was actually the creation of a staff position that manages equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives for the organization. And that really came into focus when Mario Rosero, who is the current executive director for NAEA, took charge, and he's amazing, has been instrumental in like pushing that work. It's something that he's passionate about as well. And so he created the director of ED&I at NAEA. And so this role is actually only about 3.5 months old now at this point. So it's still fairly new. It did
Yeah.
not exist
Yeah.
before. And when it came around, I was excited because I was like, first of all, to the fact that like this was happening, right? This was a
Right. Right.
recommendation that the group had created. Like it's exciting to see that actually was moving. And then secondly, this is just something that, like you said, like this is something I'm passionate about. This is something I've always, I've been thinking about this within my teaching, within my work, since grad school, since very far, back early on, and something that I'm continuing to be excited about. And I'll be really honest, and when I say that, like, I also felt confident that this work would mean something and would actually have an impact based on where the leadership is now, based on folks like Wanda and James and Mario,
Mm-hmm.
because I think you can have a director of ED&I, but nothing happens. But you have to
Right.
have that leadership support in order to really push this. And so, so I mean, when it came around, I was excited. I put my name into that, and was lucky enough to be selected for the role.
All right. So now that you're in this position, you've been there a few months. Can you talk about some of your goals? Like, what do you want to accomplish, or what does NAEA at large want to accomplish when it comes to equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Um, yeah, I think that's a great question. In a lot of ways, the goals are really they're based upon um, what our membership wants. Right? We've heard from our membership that this is important to them,
Mm-hmm.
that this really matters, and this is something that they want to have happening. And so, we're looking at ways that like NAEA policies need to be reexamined and rebuilt, and like considering and how do we consider issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion within that. We're looking at a lot of communication because I think one of the major issues with equity, diversity, and inclusion work right now is that folks don't always have a clear idea of what that means or what it
Right.
is. And also, there's a lot of stuff out there in the world which I think, unfortunately, really casts equity and diversity and inclusion work as a negative, right? Like it
Hmm.
started to flip it on its head because, as we know, there are folks who, um, just to I'll be to put it politely, like they're very opposed
Yeah.
to this work
Yeah.
moving forward, um, or just are resistant to it. And so, how can we as an organization serve our membership in a way that we can help clarify, help really kind of show why this work is so urgent, why it's so important, and how can we do that in a way that is also thinking about keeping everybody in the conversation. I think one of the things about this job is that, which, to be really frank, is also a challenge for me sometimes, is like I have to be very much like not exactly neutral, but I have to like I'm pushing the work, but also trying to
Hmm.
keep people in the conversation. And I think folks
Yes.
have
Yes.
different ways of thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion work. Sometimes it's like the train is going. I'm getting on the train, and if we leave some folks behind, like I'm really sorry, but like we got to go.
Right.
Others is, like we've got to hold the doors. We've got to keep these doors open so we can get as many people onto the train as possible. And so there's this kind of balance that I'm trying to play between like keeping those doors open because I want to get as many people as possible, but that we don't stay here in the same spot, on and on, which I think is actually a fair critique of ED&I work is that sometimes there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action. So
Hmm.
how are we making sure that there is action? So communication, I think it's building the capacity and skills of our membership, and that's through um, dialogue and conversation about these things. Building the capacity for folks to deal with work that's things that are uncomfortable, things that are not going to be easy conversations. We know that that's part of you know, what ED&I work is, and also creating resources. And so I'll talk a little bit in a second about some of the resources, but how do we provide concrete, whether that's lessons and curricula, whether that's strategies for conversation, whether that's links to like um, other podcasts, things that like even things that like Art of Ed has done, which I think are really great. I think I've seen a lot of really. I was really impressed with the CRT piece
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
all put
Just
out there.
just a little
Talk
while
about
ago.
that.
Yep.
Stuff like that. That's really great. And so, how can we link and share to like things like that, which I think are essential.
Yeah, that's very true. And I, like you said, I think there's a lot out there, but we do need to figure out, how people can access that stuff, how they can get started. But yeah, can I ask you about some specifics?
Yeah.
You're talking about wanting to take action. Like, do you have any initiatives or specific plans that you can share? Can you talk about some things that you are going to be working on in the coming months?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the major pieces that we're going to do is we are going to launch a state ED&I liaison role. And so
Mm,
what we're looking to create is a position that works with the state art ed associations. So every state who will be essentially a conduit, kind of two-way conduit, can will be in close communication with me to talk about the priorities that NAEA has created, but also then letting us know what the specific needs and priorities are for their individual states. Um, ED&I work, I think, is important. Like a couple things to really think about is that, like, number one, it's not the work of just one person. It's not owned by one person. This is the kind of
right.
work that doesn't get done unless we all do it together. So it has to be collaborative. Number two, it's not a one size fits all. Everyone's at a different place in their journey. And so trying to create like a giant plan that we say every state needs to do this and meet this and that's not going to work. And so
Hmm.
how can we really meet the states where they are? Just like, this is, I think, we talk about teaching pedagogy. It's not so different, right? When we're in a classroom, we got to meet kids where they are. Like, not every
Yeah.
kid comes in with the same level of skill as an artist. And so, um, to expect every kid to be painting, doing oil painting is not like, like the
Yeah.
first thing when they're not even, they haven't had a basic background in like, the elements. And so, how can we work with the states to think about where they are? And so that state liaison role is going to be essential for that. There's going to be a series of trainings that we'll do with those individuals. They will be able to help create their own state ED&I teams. And so we're going to provide resources, and it'll be a kind of back and forth relationship. And so we really see that as building our network
Hmm.
in order to expand this ED&I work. That's one of the major things we have happening. That's going to be rolling out very soon, and I'm excited for that. Um, we're also working on something called, it's going to be called, it's going to be called the Hub right now. It is
Okay.
our
Yeah.
resource repository where we will be able to take um, resources that have been done around equity, diversity, and inclusion within NAEA and store them there. And that includes looking at creating our own, potentially our own like podcast or video cast series that like we'll have some
Hmm.
of these conversations, bringing folks in who are talking about these topics, links to online resources, sharing. And this is a lot of this work is generated by our ED&I commission, but um, sharing articles, writing that they have around these topics. So that's going to be very much a space that we can kind of gather resources and hold and be able to share with folks.
Yeah.
And that's in process right now. We're hoping to have that up soon, and definitely before the convention in March, but be able to share that with people. And then the last piece I'll say is that been lucky enough to have this a grant through the NEA over the last few years where we've been doing a lot of cultural competency training work and
Okay.
started
Yeah.
developing some models, which I think are doing some really great work. Kind of a train the trainer model piece where we are working with a group of arts educators, and then they've been doing trainings. They most recently did that at the state leadership um, regional meetings that happened this past summer, and did some cultural competency work with the folks who were at those meetings. And so we're looking to expand that, and that'll probably be part of the state ED&I liaison work too. But it's sort of a professional development and a leadership component kind of coming together and building. So those are some of the big things that we have coming up. And and there's other stuff too that we're excited for. The commission is hard at work trying to put together a lot of these pieces.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear, and that is a lot to look forward to. All right, I have two more questions for you. One
Mm-hmm.
is more big picture. One is very like small focus. But
Sure.
big picture wise, when we look at the ranks of art educators, when we look at ourselves as a whole, it's clear, at least to me, that we have some work to do when it comes to diversity in our ranks. So, like, is that a goal for you or for NAEA? Like, where do you begin with something like that, trying to diversify the ranks of art teachers that are out there?
Um, I think it's actually one of the most important questions, because I think if we talk about the field, I appreciate you talk about that. We know that that's work that needs to be done, and it's so important and essential. Um, it is a goal for me. Of course, it's a goal for NAEA. It's within the recommendations from the ED&I task force to look at the diversity of the field and how do we grow, recruit, and retain those
Mm-hmm.
individuals for us. So right now we're talking about a couple different strategies. There, at the most last, it started last year, and we'll continue to move forward. Is that we had a ED&I scholarship that was specifically, really looking at like BIPOC folks and trying to encourage them to be able to attend the convention. And so, like, looking at costs and how do we alleviate that cost. So there were
Mm-hmm.
scholarships built there. We have continued to engage with that group, and we're trying to like build them as a cohort to do some more work as leaders in the field. And so that's part of a leadership and mentorship development piece that we see as being really essential. And several of our commissioners are really passionate and excited for that work, because um, you can encourage people to come in the field all you want, but also how do you keep them?
Right. Right.
How to keep them and grow them? Folks like James and Wanda as the president and president elect, they've done an amazing job of actually being mentors to a lot of these types of individuals, and and so they've paved the way, and they're making sure that others are able to follow them in that path. So um, mentorship and leadership training is something that we really are looking at. Another element is actually at the convention this year, we're going to create some cultural identity and affinity spaces for folks, because we want to really look at, again, like how do we, um, when you go to the convention, and you look around, if you're not, if you're not someone who's white, you often don't see a lot of faces
Mm-hmm.
that are like yours. And, that's just being really honest within like this context, right? And that's not like putting down any of the people who are there. I'm excited. I love, that we have a convention where we're able to bring all these amazing art educators together. But for those underrepresented groups, how do we create spaces for them to connect with others and also build their own power? And so creating these cultural identity group spaces will help to do that. And so and we're not talking just racial identity groups, but the racial identity, we're looking at gender and sexuality, disability. And so we want to start to build some of those spaces. This is a first kind of crack at it. We're going to create a space and like build where they can just connect and talk to each other, and then hopefully grow that throughout the year, because these are also just a start. This is just a beginning to that kind of work. You can't just end it, like make the space and be like, yay, we're done,
Yes.
ED&I work never ends. It's ongoing. And so those spaces will be a start to help to hopefully I'm hoping to address some of those some of the lack of diversity that we have.
Yeah, that sounds really promising. And the last thing I wanted to ask you, I guess, just advice for you for people who are interested in this topic. Like, what do you say for people who are interested in doing, equity, diversity, and inclusion work, but they don't know where to start. They don't know how to begin. Like, what can they do, in their own circles, in their own classrooms to get started with this type of work?
Again, excellent question. We actually do have an NAEA resource called the Getting Started with ED&I. It's a part of our toolkits. So that's online now, and it's a great document that it actually was created before I even started. So, like,
Okay.
again, NAEA looking and thinking about this work, but Mario was working with the ED&I Commission to draft this kind of Getting Started toolkit. And so that's available on our website. But I think it's important just to start doing some reflection. I don't think there's enough reflection being done in general in the field. And so when we take a look at our own teaching in the classroom, who are the artists that we're elevating? Who are the artists that kids are seeing? Are they reflective of the population of students that you're teaching? And even if not, like, one of the things I used to do in my classroom is I really very consciously was showing women artists and artists of color. As if I was showing any kinds of exemplars or like, artists to relate to the work we were doing, because they weren't represented or they weren't seen enough. I looked at the posters that I had in my classroom, and I was always trying to share and put up posters of, again, artists who were not part of the canon, who just looked, who were able to bring some diversity to the field. And so, as a teacher, like, I think that's a great place to start. Who are the artists you're showing? Who are the artists you're like sharing with students? And then starting to like move into like, one of the biggest challenges I think right now that we're encountering is that in the field broadly, in education, there's this attack on like being able to teach equity and diversity work, right? We know that there's legislation in some states where like that's happening. And essentially, like CRT is the kind of like the boogeyman of like language they use. But like when you look further down, it's actually like they're talking about not being able to teach about like identity and race. And like, I think, our teachers are one of the, they teach, that's a core part of what we teach. When we're asking students to express themselves, they're teaching about who they are, and like they're expressing themselves through their identity, right? There's obviously technical skill, other things that come into it, but like their ideas come from who they are. And so how can we, make sure that those classroom teachers are still able to do that? And how can we make sure that they're still feeling comfortable encouraging their students to express themselves in that way? And so, I would say, like, as a teacher, are you encouraging your students to like ask questions and express themselves, and like really kind of not necessarily shy away from difficult conversations and topics, but like, I think when students are able to create work that spurs dialogue and conversation and like comes from who they are, that's when I feel like I'm most successful. And I think a lot of teachers would agree. And so, are you doing that? It's hard. It's challenging in a way that I think is, you know, um, amplified more now than ever. And so
Mhm.
hopefully some of the work that we're doing within NAEA and my work as the director of ED&I will help to like support teachers in that and also find ways for them to address that. But um, but do that work in your own classroom. And actually, I would also encourage folks to also ask questions about for themselves, like do their own reflecting. Like um, if we can be open minded and really think about like ask questions like did something I do was something that I did insensitive or not thinking about this or not being inclusive, and not get defensive around that, like we can all grow because
Yep.
then we can kind of like build classrooms that are going to support all of our students and elevate all of our students.
Yeah, very well said. All right, well, we will go ahead and wrap it up there. Ray, thank you so much for giving us the time. Thank you so much for the conversation. I appreciate it, and you've given us a lot to look forward to in the coming months from NAEA. So thank you for all that.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
As I just said to Ray, there's a lot to look forward to and also a lot to think about. And one idea that I kept coming back to as we were talking was the train analogy that Ray used. I really appreciate that analogy, and I know that balance is difficult because so many people want to move, but you also want to get as many people to come along as possible. So, the question is, how do you find that balance? I know they want to help everyone get on board, but they also need to keep from getting bogged down, keep from just having the wheels spinning as you continue to talk about things. But my impression from our discussion today is that this ED&I work is not just talk. They're not going to be just spinning their wheels. They're going to be doing the work. There are specific goals, specific initiatives, and Ray seems to have a clear vision for what they want to accomplish. There are resources being created. There are concrete takeaways for teachers and for people who want to do the work. I will link to a couple of things that Ray shared, including that Getting Started with ED&I document from NAEA that people can check out. Find the show notes in order to find those. I will also link to the CRT article from Jenny Drummond that we discussed briefly, because I think it's a good one that is worth reading. But all that being said, I just want to send a big thank you to Ray for coming on. I appreciate that they are taking on a challenging role, and I appreciate that there's a lot of work to do. And right now, there's no roadmap on how to do it. This is something that NAEA has never done before, or at least I have not seen it from them. And I'm glad that they're taking it on in a real and serious way. But whatever comes of it, whatever the results are of this work, I think it's worth just one final thought here. I just want to leave you with something that Ray said when they were talking about some of the new work that's getting started and how we try to get everyone on board. They said this work doesn't get done unless we all do it together. So, like Ray recommended, and like I say far too often at the end of this podcast, I would encourage you to take some time to reflect on, what you're doing in your own classroom, what you want to be doing, what you can get better at, and how you might want to be a part of this work. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Thank you, as always, for listening, and we will talk to you next week.